think giving Nancy Pelosi more power over it is the solution for anything right now. We got into this crisis because for 30 years, beginning with the Community Reinvestment Act under Jimmy Carter of 1977, government forced and coerced banks to give loans they couldn't afford. And after 30 years of building on top of this glass bottom, eventually it collapsed. And as always happens with the government after regulating and regulating and regulating, and then it fails, they stand before the American people and say, hey, capitalism failed, better let us take it over now. And instead, Representative Giffords voted for a bill that's over 2,000 pages that once again we were told we need to pass it to see what's in it, that gives the federal government the power to seize private companies. This is the United States of America, and our government just passed a bill that gives them the power to seize private companies. There is one kind of regulation that will never ever fail, and that is self-regulation. Because no one will look after your dollar the way you will. Certainly no bureaucrat, and certainly no one elected to the government. We don't need bigger government, we don't need more government, we need less government. Over 2.9 million private sector jobs, and the last year and a half lost over 400,000 federal jobs gained. The government's growing, the private sector's shrinking, and we're continually told that more government is the answer. I think less government is the answer.
You have a chance to respond?
Yeah. Mr. Kelly needs to get his facts straight. More private sector jobs were created this year. 860,000 private sector jobs created this year.
Please, folks.
Then was lost. There was a net loss under the former administration. 860,000 jobs. More jobs have been created just this year than the entire 8 years of the Bush administration. That's the fact. That's the fact. Now, let me tell you what it was like 2 years ago when I was in Congress and President Bush, the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve contacted us late in the week to tell us that if we did not act, there would be no economy on Monday. That's what we were told. The TARP, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, also known as the Wall Street bailout, you guys contacted me. I've got a very active district. I heard not just vote no, hell no, do not bail out Wall Street. I voted against the TARP. And the next day, approximately 3,000 of you in my district called me or emailed me back and said my retirement is gone. My life savings have evaporated. $1.3 trillion lost in the stock market that night. We worked together, Democrats and Republicans. Senator John Kyle voted for the TARP. Senator John McCain voted for the TARP. Congressman John Shadegg, very conservative Republican from Phoenix, voted for the TARP. In order to make sure that we could keep our economy going, $700 billion authorized, $380 billion spent, and of that, over half has been paid back. Later, we passed legislation to clamp down on those banks and financial institutions who wreaked havoc with our savings, putting a Consumer Protection Act in place that will protect consumers, not continue to line the pockets of all of these Wall Street companies.
Thank you, Ms. Giffords.
Only Washington will try to sell it as a positive that they only took $300 billion of your money to bail out banks on Wall Street. That's all, just $300 billion. And Representative Giffords did bring up a great point about we're constantly hearing from now that it's election year that how bipartisan that Representative Giffords is. She's been very bipartisan in spending more money than we take in. She did it under Republicans. She's done it under Democrats. We can count on Representative Giffords to always reach across the aisle to spend more money than we take in. They just passed a budget that allows them to spend twice as much as they're going to take.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Okay, the next question. This question goes to Ms. Giffords. Should the Bush tax cuts be extended, modified, or allowed to expire?
The Bush tax cuts of 01 and 03 will come due at the end of this year, and Congress needs to act. That's one of the reasons why I voted not to adjourn at the end of the session, because I thought a lot more work needs to be done. But we will take up the Bush tax cuts in the next couple of weeks. Let me tell you where I stand. I'm going to be straight with you, as I always have been. I will support the continuation of the Bush tax cuts for 98% of all Americans. 98% of all Americans, with my vote, will be continued. And for that top 8% of the income earners, on the first $250,000 of joint income after deductions, they too will see a continuation with my support of the Bush tax cuts. So essentially everyone, $250,000 after deductions will receive a continuation. But what it would cost the rest of us for that 2% to continue to get the extension that was provided under the previous administration would be $700 billion. We can't afford to continue that extension for the millionaires and the billionaires in America. We can't afford to do it. You know where I stand. The legislation will be coming soon. We're going to try to be bipartisan about this. But I believe that the majority of Americans right now are frustrated. They're struggling. Of course they are. So giving them, raising their taxes right now is not acceptable. That's why 98% will get the full continuation, and that top 2% of income earners will get the continuation on the first $250,000 after deduction, and then anything they make above that will revert back to the previous tax level.
Well, we really see, this is another stark contrast between Representative Giffords and I, and the choice couldn't be clearer in November. When we heard the words out of the President's own mouth, they passed tax cuts that weren't paid for. It's never your trillions in spending by the government that wasn't paid for. They just haven't stolen enough of your money yet to pay for it. And we hear again the politics of class warfare, hate your neighbor, they have an extra loaf of bread that you don't have, so vote for me and I promise I'll steal it from them. We need to extend all of the Bush tax cut. Those top marginal rates, those horrible, evil, rich people, those are small businesses, registered as S corps. We have 10% unemployment and we're talking about raising taxes on small business. That is the definition of going into a depression. We cannot do this anymore. And forget not only extending the Bush tax cuts, we need a 10% flat tax for every single American. If 10% is good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for the federal government. The Social Security tax and every other thing they choose. They tax you on your Social Security check when you get it. They have a death tax. It's not enough that they tax you 3 or 4 ways while you're alive. They tax half of it again when you're dead. It's unbelievable. America, the United States of America, is not the government. It's the American people. We will pay an amount of taxes that will fund the constitutionally mandated portions of our government, and then the rest of it, they can just sit on it because they don't need it anymore. Step aside. Stop spending more than you take in, and we, the American people, are not an orange for you to come squeeze as much as you want after you're done paying us and spending us into bankruptcy.